Welcome to a deep dive, you guys, into Think Again by Adam Grant.
Well, podcast episode all about it.
Right, so it's like a deep dive into a deep dive.
Exactly.
We're going to help you not just grasp these big ideas from the book, but why they matter to you.
Yeah.
It's like a shortcut to becoming a master of rethinking, I guess.
Yes. Constantly evolving your thinking for the better. We're taking information that's already been distilled and we're making it even more potent for your journey of continuous learning.
Love it. Okay, so imagine this, right? You're scrolling through your feed, you're just bombarded with articles and opinions and hot takes, and it's overwhelming, right?
It is.
Just keeping up is like a full-time job.
And that's just it. It's not enough to just consume information, even if you're great at remembering facts.
Yeah.
The real skill here is knowing what to do with it, how to process it without getting bogged down.
Totally. And that's where Think Again comes in. And one of the core ideas that Grant talks about is this thing called intellectual humility, which sounds kind of
Heady.
heady,
A little bit.
but it's actually really powerful.
It is. Think of it this way. Intellectual humility is like having a mental open-door policy. It's about acknowledging that you don't have all the answers.
Okay.
And that, in fact, what you believe to be true right now could be wrong.
Oh, wow.
And that's okay. That's actually an incredibly valuable approach, especially in today's world.
I can see how that ties into this information overload that we're talking about. Because if we're clinging to these outdated beliefs,
Yes.
we're not only missing out on new information,
Right.
but we're potentially making decisions based on flawed foundations.
Right.
It's like trying to navigate a maze with an old, inaccurate map.
Precisely. Intellectual humility allows us to update our mental maps as we go, so we can be more adaptable and open to new information as it emerges.
So important. So if you want to make better decisions, whether it's in your personal life or your career, cultivating that intellectual humility is like laying the groundwork
Yeah.
for success. It's
Yeah.
recognizing that there's always more to learn. And that's incredibly freeing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it opens up a world of possibilities because when you're not afraid to be wrong, you're more willing to experiment, to learn from your mistakes,
Yeah.
and to embrace new perspectives.
And that brings us to Grant's framework of 4 thinking styles, which I love, which is basically how are we approaching situations? We've got the scientist, the preacher, the prosecutor, and the politician. I have a feeling we can all relate to at least one of those.
I think we all have at some point.
Right. It's like trying on different hats.
It is. Sometimes we don't even realize we've put on a particular hat until somebody points it out.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got these 4 thinking styles: scientist, preacher, prosecutor, and politician. I have a feeling, like we said, we can all relate to at least one of these.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Grant actually suggests that the scientist is kind of the ideal,
Yeah.
especially in a world that's constantly changing. It's about approaching situations with that curiosity and a willingness to update your beliefs based on new information.
Okay, so instead of clinging to our pre-existing ideas, like a preacher defending a sermon or something, we should be more like scientists,
Yeah.
Conducting experiments always open to new data. I like that a lot. But how does that actually play out? If we were to give it a real-world example.
Yeah. Let's say you're facing a challenge at work.
Yeah.
Maybe a project isn't going as planned. The preacher might insist on sticking to the original plan, even if it's clearly not working.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
The prosecutor may start pointing fingers looking for someone to blame. The politician, on the other hand, might try to spin the situation to their advantage, even if it means sacrificing the overall goal.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how those approaches could backfire. So where does the scientist come in?
The scientist would approach the problem with a curious and open mind. They might ask, what can we learn from this setback? What data points do we have? How can we adjust our approach based on what we're observing?
I see. So it's about being adaptable, willing to change course based on new information, and not being afraid to say, I don't know, but let's find out.
Exactly.
Which kind of brings us to another key takeaway from Think Again, which is this idea of unlearning.
Unlearning, yeah, it's crucial because it allows us to make room for new knowledge and new perspectives. It's like cleaning out your mental closet. You can't bring in new clothes if it's already crammed full of outdated items.
I love that. Unlearning and cleaning out the closet.
Right.
So how does unlearning actually work? How do we let go of beliefs or information that might be holding us back?
It starts with questioning what you think you know. Remember that open-door policy of intellectual humility? Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Where did this information come from? Is it still relevant today?
Right.
This kind of self-reflection can be incredibly powerful.
Especially for like those of us who love to learn, it's easy to get caught up in accumulating more and more information. But unlearning reminds us that sometimes letting go is just as important as taking in new stuff.
Absolutely. By letting go of those outdated beliefs or assumptions, we create space for new growth and new opportunities. It's like clearing a path for ourselves to move forward with more clarity and purpose.
Okay, so we're being intellectually humble. We're open to unlearning. We're channeling our inner scientists. But does that mean we just have to be like completely unsure of ourselves all the time? Where's the confidence in all of this?
That's such a great question, and it leads us to another brilliant insight from Adam Grant, which is this idea of confident humility.
Confident humility.
Yes.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance between believing in your abilities while remaining open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
So how does this confident humility actually work in practice? It feels like a tricky balance to strike.
It is. It takes practice.
Yeah.
But think of it like this. Confidence is about trusting your abilities, while humility is about recognizing your limitations. It's not about being perfect. It's about being open to growth.
Mm-hmm.
You could think of it like, picture a tightrope walker.
Okay.
They have the confidence to walk across the rope,
Mm.
but they also have the humility to use a balance pole and a safety net.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Yeah.
So it's about having the courage to take risks and put yourself out there, but also being open to feedback and willing to adjust if you need to, which I can see how that's valuable everywhere, but especially in like leadership roles.
Absolutely. Leaders who demonstrate that confident humility, they create an environment where it's safe for others to take risks, to admit mistakes, and to learn from each other. It fosters trust and collaboration, which are so essential for success in any field.
Yeah. And it makes me think about like how we approach disagreements or arguments. Often it feels like the goal is to win the argument, even if it means like damaging the relationship. But what if we shifted our mindset a little bit? And I know the podcast episode touched on this too. Like how does think again apply to those like kind of tricky interpersonal situations?
Yeah, this is where Grant introduces the concept of motivational interviewing.
Yeah.
Which again sounds very formal, but it's actually a surprisingly effective communication tool.
Okay.
And it's especially useful when you're trying to have a constructive conversation with someone who might be resistant to change.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this motivational interviewing. How does it actually work? Well, imagine instead of trying to convince someone to see your point of view, you ask questions that help them uncover their own motivations for change.
Interesting. So it's like holding up a mirror and allowing them to see their own reflections.
Right.
Rather than trying to like force feed them your perspective.
Oh, so it's more about like guiding them towards their own conclusions.
Yeah.
Rather than just like imposing your own, which I can see, again, being so powerful, especially in situations where you're trying to like build consensus or navigate a really sensitive topic.
Exactly. And it all circles back to those key principles we've been discussing. You know, intellectual humility, curiosity, and a willingness to see things from those multiple perspectives. And Grant actually gives a great example on the podcast of a question you can try next time you're in a disagreement. Instead of saying, you're wrong about this, you could ask, can you help me understand what you're seeing that I'm missing?
That's brilliant because it shifts the entire dynamic from like this confrontation
Yeah.
to like, hey, let's work together. It acknowledges that they have a point, even if you don't fully see it yet.
I love that. This has been awesome. I love diving into Adam Grant's work, and this was a great conversation. So thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening. We'll catch you guys next time.